Chapter 35 Requiem in 10 parts. 1. Introitus. It begins with hushed anticipation. The conductor stands, hand poised, all eyes on the wand, as if its dumb stroke will bring a dark magic. Today's piece is an orchestral wonder, a requiem conceived of and performed by sibilant followers of the dawn, the thunder, and the martyr toll. A requiem performed in response to the mile-high gleaning an ocean away. Can you hear it now, ringing forth in the streets of poor remembrance? A wordless, tongueless mass of mortality in an immortal world? Sweeping strains of fire and brimstone, but mostly fire. These sibilants are well prepared for the music they will deliver today, and for those who hear it, there will be no deliverance. 2. Dies Irae. Fire trucks were all automated, yet still they were designed to require a human at the wheel, for the Thunderhead had planned it that way. Of course, if the human made a wrong turn, the truck would override the human and correct the error. The fire chief of poor remembrance thought about that often. Before he became chief, he would intentionally make mistakes while driving his rig just to entertain himself, to see how long it took for the course correction to register and for the truck to get itself back on track. The Thunderhead could use robots to do the job of firefighters, he supposed, but the Thunderhead had never been too keen on robots. It only used them for mindless labor that no one else wanted. And so, firefighters were still firefighters. But that didn't mean they had much to do, because whenever a fire started, the Thunderhead always saw it when it was little more than a spark, and was usually able to put it out. It was only on those rare occasions that it could not that firefighters were called in, although the chief had come to believe that the Thunderhead started safe fires just to give them something to do. At 6:30 in the evening, an alarm went off in the firehouse. Used to be that the Thunderhead would talk to them and explain the nuances of the situation they were about to get into. Now it just sounded an alarm, programmed their GPSs, and let them figure the rest out for themselves. Today's alarm was strange, however. There was no destination set on their screens. The garage doors didn't roll up, but still the alarm blurred. It was only when the door to the firehouse blew off its hinges and figures began to race in that the firefighters realized the alarm was not a fire alert. It was to warn them that they were under attack. Tonists! Dozens of them spilled through the door, all letting off the nasty bee-like droning sound. The Tonists had weapons, and the men and women of the unit simply were not prepared for this unexpected day of wrath. The fire chief stood in astonishment. He wanted to defend them, but how? With what? No one ever attacked a firefighter, except for maybe the occasional scythe, but when a scythe attacked, you got gleaned. End of story. You didn't fight back. You didn't struggle. But this was very different. The Stonists were rendering people deathish left and right, and no one knew what to do. Think, he told himself. Think! He was trying to fight fires, not people. Think! There has to be something I can do. And then it came to him. Fire axes! They had fire axes. He ran across the garage to grab one, but could he actually use it against another human being? He'd have to, because he wasn't about to let these sibilants render his entire unit deathish. Just then, the Tonists began throwing rocks at the trucks. One came in the chief's direction, and he caught it before it could hit him. It wasn't exactly a rock, though. First of all, it was metallic and had hard ridges. He'd seen something like this before in history books. Think! What was it called? Oh, right, a grenade! And, in an instant, there was nothing more for the chief to think about. 3. Confutatis. Hybrid Tenkamening was a deliberate man. He only appeared to be impulsive and flip when, in fact, everything about his life was planned and organized. Even the chaos of his lunar jubilees was a controlled chaos. He suspected that time was of the essence after that urgent warning call from his father, but it was impossible for him to fight his own instincts. He had quickly retreated to his humble residence, where he struggled with his bullet to figure out what he needed to take with him for a hasty escape. A second rope, of course, but should it be one for cold weather or warm? Who should be notified that they were leaving? Hyblitz couldn't just bonus. He found himself confounded by it all. "Your Excellency," said the valet, "didn't you say that we were in a hurry?" Yes, of course. And there were things of sentimental value that absolutely had to come with him. The engraved obsidian revolver given to him by Grand Slayer Nzinga the day he took her place as Highblade, the silver dagger he'd used for his first cleaning. If this place was about to be overrun, who knew if he'd ever see his prized possessions again? He absolutely had to take them. For 10 minutes he obsessed over what he should and should not take, and was only stopped by the first distant explosions. 4. Lacrimosa. "If we're leaving, we should leave now." Anastasia paced the grand hall beneath the palace's central dome with fury, waiting for everyone else to show. "Where the hell are Tinkamen and the others?" "Maybe you're overreacting," said Yuri. "I've had dealings with many Tonists, and never once have I known them to be violent. Annoying and strident, maybe, but never violent." "You didn't see these Tonists," Anastasia said. "And if Tinkamenin thinks they're up to something, I believe him." "Then let's leave without him," Jerry offered. "Let him and the others catch up with us." "I'm not about to leave him," Anastasia said. Just then, a series of far-off explosions echoed through the grand atrium. They both stopped to listen. More explosions filled the air like distant thunder. "Wherever it is," said Yuri, "it's not here in the palace." "No, but it's going to be." Anastasia knew that whatever those explosions were, it was an omen of wars to come. An angry promise that this day would most certainly end in tears. 5. Sanctus. The young Tonis was a loyal follower. She did what her curate told her to do, because he was a true man of the tone, holy and sanctified. Their curate had not spoken for many years, and on the day of the great resonance, the day the thunderhead went silent, he was the first to surrender his tongue. Words lied, words connived, they dissembled with impunity, they slandered, and, above all, they offended the purity of the tone. One by one, all the Tonists in their order made their vow a permanent one, as their curate had. Not a vow of silence, but a vow of vowels, a complete surrendering of the harsh, unnatural clicks, hisses, and pops that consonants brought. Language was the enemy of the Tonist. This is what their sect believed. Of course, there were many other Tonists who did not, but they would soon see the light, even the ones who had blinded themselves. While one team took out the firehouse, and another the peace officers' precinct, their curate led the largest team to the palace. They all had weapons, the kind that common citizens weren't supposed to have. They had been given them by an unknown benefactor, a secret servitor of their cause. The Tonists were not trained in these weapons, but what did that matter? Swing the blade, pull the trigger, hurl the grenade, and press the detonator. With so many of them armed, they didn't need to be all that skilled to achieve their goal. And they also had kerosene, jigs and jacks of it. The Tonists made sure she was part of the first wave. She was frightened, but also joyous for her part in this. Now was their time. In the wake of the mile-high cleaning, when ire against sides was at a full boil, people would finally see the Tony's way. They would cheer for what would be done here today, and the sub-Saharan region would be a klaxon calling out to the rest of the world, waking them into the glory of the tone, toll, and thunder. All rejoice! She opened her mouth to intone as she neared the palace, and others joined her. It was so satisfying to be the one who started them intoning. They were of one mind, one spirit, one chord. Then, climbing on the backs of her brethren, she and dozens of others began to scale the palace wall. 6. Agnus Dei. Anastasia and Yuri, with Sides, Makade, and Baba close behind, finally met up with Tenkamenin in the rose garden, halfway between the palace and his cottage. His bullet was struggling with a large rolling suitcase that wouldn't roll on the pebbles of the narrow garden path. "We've called for the helicopter," Scythe Makeda informed everyone, "but it will take at least a minute to get here from the airport." "And that's only if the pilot isn't off in some bar," Baba added, "like he was the last time." "It will be fine," Tenkamenin said, a bit out of breath. "It come for us, and everything will be fine." Then he turned to lead everyone to the heliport, which was on the property's west lawn. Around them, the entire compound was in motion. Palace staff hurried, going this way and that, their arms full of belongings. The Blade Guard were flooding out of the barracks and taking strategic positions, something they had probably done only in exercises. And then they heard a noise from the west, a chorus of droning voices, each one hitting a different discordant monotone. And figures began dropping over the western wall. "We're too late," said Tenkamenin, holding them in their tracks. Alarms began to blare all around them, and the blade guards took immediate action, firing on the invading force, adding the sound of gunfire to the cacophony. Tonys fell left and right, but for everyone the guards took down, two more scaled the wall. It wouldn't be long before the guards were overwhelmed. The civilians were armed with more than rocks, and they used their weapons against the guards with such brutality it was shocking. Where the hell did they get those kind of weapons? Didn't Tonism expose inner peace and stoic acceptance? "That which comes can be avoided," Anastasia mumbled. It was the Tony's favorite mantra. It suddenly took on a terrible new meaning. The heavy suitgate was blown off its hinges by an explosion, and as the gates fell, a mob of Tonys pushed through. They cut through the line of blade guards in seconds and began throwing what looked like bottles of alcohol with burning rags shoved in them. Fire broke out everywhere the bottles crashed. "They mean to burn us so we can be revived," said Baba, near panic, "just like Scythe Lucifer did." Anastasia wanted to snap at Baba for even mentioning Rowan in the same breath as this twisted sect of Tonists, but she stopped herself. As the battle spilled onto the heliport ahead of them, Tenkamenin had them change direction. "The east patio," he said. "There's more than enough space for the helicopter to land there. Come." They doubled back, crossing through the rose garden, getting scratched, and poked by thorns on the way. But even before they reached the east patio, they could see that this end of the compound had also been breached. Tonys were everywhere, attacking people running out of the staff house, chasing them down, and rendering them mercilessly deaths. "Why are they attacking the police staff?" said Anastasia. "What possible reason could they have?" "They are without reason," said Scythe Makeda. "Without reason, conscience, or decency." Their server, who was so particular about the placement of silverware, was felled by a knife in the back. That's when Baba turned on Tenkamenin. "You should have fortified," he yelled. "Added another garrison of blade guard, or even cleaned this pack of Tonys before they could launch an attack on us. This is all your fault." Tenkamenin balled his hands into fists and stormed toward Baba, but Yuri got between them. "You can salvage your egos later," Yuri said. "But first, we have to leave if you're going to have this fight." Anastasia looked around. They were under cover of darkness, so had not yet been spotted, but that wouldn't last long as the fires grew. And then, as if the commotion around them wasn't enough, a new sort of droning filled the air. This one from actual drones. From the sky descended a swarm of ammo drones. They had been mobilized from the nearest revival center when people began to go deaths. They zeroed in on the bodies lying in the grass and on the pavement. Tonists, blade guards, palace staff. They didn't differentiate between the dead and the deadies. They scooped them up in their insect-like pincers, carrying them off for revival. "There's our ticket," said Scythe Baba. "Who needs a helicopter?" And without waiting for the high blades leave, Baba ran across the field toward the closest Tumbledrone, like a lamb to the slaughter. Ahmad, no! Called the companion. But Baba was already committed and wasn't turning back. The moment the Tonys saw a scythe's rope, they shifted gears and raced after Baba, intercepting him. He pulled out blades from his rope, took Tonys down all around him, but it was no use. They overwhelmed him, threw him to the ground, and attacked him with everything they had, including his own weapons. Scythe Makeda tried to go after him, but Anastasia stopped her. There's nothing we can do for him now. Makeda nodded, but didn't take her eyes off her fallen comrade. He may be the luckiest of us, she said. If they've killed him, the drones will get him. They'll carry him off to be revived. But the drones did not go after him. There were so many other bodies around the compound. They were all already committed, and to Numbodrone, one body was no different from another. And that's when Anastasia realized. They're killing the stuff to tie up the drones, so that there won't be any left to go after the sides. And with no drones to carry Baba away, the Tonys grabbed his body and dragged him toward a flaming pyre that would reduce him to unrevivable ash. They hurled him upon it, and the flames surged. To the palace, said Tenkamenin, and once more led the way, as if somehow being in motion made them any less trapped. 7. Benedictus. They piled into the palace, where half a dozen blade guards closed the ponderous bronze doors behind them and took up defensive positions. So the Tonys break through. At last there was a blessed moment of peace, a blessed moment to strategize within the madness. It could mean the difference between living or dying as signally as poor Scythe Baba. Although the palace had many windows, they all faced the central atrium, which meant that the High Blade's pleasure dome was also a mighty fortress. The question was, how mighty? They must have gathered every civilian in Sub-Sahara for this, Scythe Makeda said. It will be all right, Tenkamenin insisted. The peace officers of Poor Remembrance will arrive to fight alongside the Blade Guard, and the city's firefighters will douse the flames. All will be well. They should have been here by now, said Makeda. Why don't we hear sirens? It was Anastasia, insightful as ever, who burst their bubble. The first explosions, she said. The far-off ones. What about them? Said Tenkamenin almost threateningly, fighting for his tether of safety. Well, if I wanted to wage an illegal attack, she said, the first thing I would do would be to take out the peace officers and firefighters. And the truth of it left them all in silence, until Tenkamenin turned to his valet, who was silently wringing his hands in terror. Where are my things? I'm sorry, Your Excellency. I left the suitcase in the rose garden. Yuri glared at the High Blade. We're all about to be incinerated, and you're worried about your things? But before the High Blade could respond, a flaming truck crashed through the massive bronze doors of the palace. The doors fell off their hinges, crushing 4 blade guards beneath them, and Tonists began to flatten. That's when Yuri grabbed Anastasia and pulled her behind the column, hidden from everyone's view. I have an idea, Yuri said, but you'll have to trust me. 8. Offertorium. The civilian curate was in his element. This was what he was born for. This was his purpose, and had been his plan for years. Even before the thunder fell silent, he knew this day would come. His extreme brand of Tonism would soon be the dominant one. All those lesser Tonists who believed in tranquility, tolerance, and passive acquiescence would soon die off and burn, just as the High Blade of Sub-Sahara would burn today. The time for words was gone. Had been gone for a long time. If the curate had his way, language itself would be outlawed and replaced by wordless adulation to tone, toll, and thunder, as it was meant to be. And he would be High Curate over it all. What a glorious day that would be. But first this. A scythe in a turquoise robe raced up a grand staircase, trying to escape. The curate pointed, and half a dozen of his flock raced after the scythe. Before him, a woman in a salmon silk robe, whom he recognized as Scythe Makeda, was on the attack, skillfully gleaning the Tonists attacking her. Loyal and true, they were sacrificing themselves for the cause. Then one was able to get around behind Makeda and ran her through. She froze, gasped, then fell like a ragdoll, her fight living along with her life. 3 Tonys grabbed her body and dragged it out toward the growing pyre outside, and its purifying flames. "You're no better than Goddard if you burn us," said one of the servants huddled at the base of the stairs with Highblade Tenkamenin. "If you go through with this, the very thing you worship will never forgive you." The Highblade put a firm hand on her shoulder to keep her quiet, but her eyes were still angry and defiant. If the great god spake, he would tell her that her words, all words, were an abomination to the Tone, and that the only reason the Tone didn't shatter her skull with furious resonance was because cleansing the world of the unworthy was left to the great, and people like him. But he couldn't tell her, and he didn't have to. His actions spoke much more loudly than words. But the Highblade was all about words. "Please," Tenkamenin begged. The curate knew what was coming next. This pompous, cowardless Scythe, this purveyor of natural death, was not going to plead for his life. Let him plead. The curate's ears were not deaf, like some other Sibylan sects, but they might as well be. "Please, you can end me, but spare this too," Tenkamenin said. "You have no gripe against this bullet and housekeeper." The curate hesitated. It was his desire to end them all, for anyone in service to a Scythe deserved a Scythe's fate, killed by association. But then the Highblade said, "Show your followers the true meaning of mercy, the way my parents showed me, my mother and father who are both among you." The curate knew this about the Highblade. His parents wordlessly begged not to be part of the attack on the palace. He had obliged by sending them to the firehouse, and they had clearly done their job well. Tenkamenin would not be spared, but out of respect for his Tony's parents, the curate would honor the man's last words. So he pulled out a pistol, shot Tenkamenin through the heart, and then gestured for the 2 servants to leave. It was a humble offering of mercy. Of course, they would most likely be killed out in the gardens and thrown on the pyre, but the Ambudrones were making off with quite a few of the deadest, so they'd have a fighting chance. But just then the housekeeper rose to her feet. The anger in her eyes was beyond anger, beyond fury, and it was focused, like the eyes of a scythe. She leaped at the nearest Tonist, took her down with a skilled martial arts kick, grabbed the machete she was holding, and swung at the curate, disarming him, literally. He watched, stunned, as his hands flew spinning into the air. Then she grabbed the gun from his severed hand, and swung its aim toward the curate. She didn't speak, because her actions spoke much louder than words. 9. Lux Aeterna. Yuriko had not trusted Anastasia's instincts, had not believed this was as serious as she made it out to be. It was a dreadful failure of judgment on Yuri's part. They could have escaped long before the outer wall was breached, had Yuri only trusted Anastasia. The captain vowed to never doubt her again. If they survived, that is, and survival now would be a tall order, indeed. As the Tonys broke into the palace, Yuri had convinced Anastasia to switch clothes. "It is my job to protect you," Yuri begged. "Please, Anastasia, let me do this for you. Do me that honor." As much as she didn't want to put Yuri in peril, when it was put to her that way, she couldn't refuse. Once wearing Anastasia's robe, Yuri took off up the grand staircase, drawing away half of the Tonists. Yuri did not know all the rooms and suites of the palace's upper levels, but knew them better than the attackers. Yuri led them into Scythe Anastasia's suite, then doubled back through a side door to an outer saloon. The palace was enough of a maze to keep Yuri from being cornered too quickly, but that would only work for so long. Then came the sound of a gunshot from downstairs, then another, No thinking about that now. The focus had to be keeping these Tonists out of that battle. Endless fires were being set throughout the palace by the invading Tonists. They lit the colonnade and upper suites in the angry, shifting light of frenetic flames. The flames turned every shadow into a figure lurching from the darkness, but those shadows also provided Yuri with enough cover to dupe the pursuers and double back. Yuri ducked into another suite, but not being used to the rope, snagged it on a door jump. Before Yuri could get it free, the Tonists were there, brandishing weapons that they clearly were not trained to use. Yuri was no scythe, but had experience with fighting weapons. There had been a time, in fact, when Yuri would go to fighting clubs. People loved to see Madagascans fight. Somehow the ambiguity made the battle more intriguing. And today, this Tonists picked the wrong Madagascan. Anastasia had left a blade in one of the pockets of the rope. Yuri pulled it out and fought like never before. 10. Libera me. Anastasia missed. Blast it! She missed the curate. A young Tonist, seeing that her curate was about to be gleaned, pushed him out of the way and took the bullet herself. And the curate, gripping the stab of his arm in pain, ran. He ran like a coward into the mob of Tonists still flooding the Grand Foyer. Tenkamenin was dead. So were Maged and Baba. The Tonists who had seen her attack the curate were still stunned and unsure what to do. She was about to glean them all in fury, but stopped herself, because gleaning in anger was not the side way, and there was a more pressing matter. Yuri. She turned and ran up the stairs. No one pursued her. They were too busy setting fire to anything that would burn. She followed the sound of fighting to one of the unused guest suites. There were a few dirty sibilants and a trail of blood on the floor. She followed the trail to a bedroom where 3 more Tonists were attacking Yuri. Yuri was on the floor, fending them off, but was outnumbered and was losing the battle. Anastasia gleaned the 3 Tonists with their own weapons and dropped to the floor, quickly trying to assess Yuri's wounds. The turquoise rope was soaked with blood. She pulled it off and ripped it, trying to use pieces as a tourniquet. I heard gunshots, Yuri said. Yuri's wounds were too severe for healing nannies to handle. They would not mend without help. Tenkamenin is dead, Anastasia said. He died protecting me. Perhaps, Yuri said weakly. Perhaps he was not as bad as I thought. If he were alive, I think he'd say the same about you. Thick smoke was already billowing through every open door. She helped Yuri out into the colonnade overlooking the atrium. Everything below them was burning. There was no way to get down the stairs. Then something occurred to her. A way out, perhaps the only chance they had. Can you climb? She asked Yuri. I can try. Anastasia helped Yuri up to the next level, then through another suite to a balcony. Beside the balcony were ladder rungs embedded in the stone, which she had seen workers use to access the bronze dome that covered the palace. One rung at a time, Anastasia got Yuri all the way up to the edge of the dome. It was designed with a gentle slope and patterned with textured divots and knobs that would give them footholds. But to Yuri, already exhausted from blood loss, it must have looked like Mount Everest. How will climbing up there? Just shut up and move, demanded Anastasia, not having time to explain. The dome was hot from the fire in the atrium below. Its glass skylights were already beginning to explode from the heat and belch forth black smoke. When they reached the pinnacle, there was a water vane in the shape of the symbol of the Scythedom, the curved blade and the blinking eye, that pivoted left and right, not sure which way the winds were blowing, because the heat was making the wind blow directly up. And now, finally, the Scythedom helicopter arrived. It headed straight for the heliport, the pilots not yet knowing that it had been overrun by Tonists. It won't see us, said Yuri. That's not why we're up here. Then an ambudron burst past them, and another, and another. They dropped toward the rose garden, which was littered with dirty skirts and tonists. "That's why we're here," Anastasia said. She tried to grab a drone, but it was moving too quickly and wasn't close enough to grasp. Then, below, the helicopter made a grievous error. Seeing the ambo drones buzzing around it, the pilot made a sudden evasive maneuver. It was unnecessary. The drones would stay far from the chopper's path, but they couldn't avoid a sudden flinch of human error that pulled the helicopter directly into their flight paths. The helicopter's blade sliced an ambo drone in two. The blade broke, and the helicopter came careening toward the palace. Anastasia grabbed Yuri and turned away. The explosion seemed to rock the entire world. It blew a hole in the palace, taking down several of the marble columns holding up the monstrously heavy bronze dome, and the dome began to list to one side. Then, from below, came the most awful vibration. "It's the remaining columns," thought Anastasia. "They can't hold the weight. They're crumbling." And still the ambo drones buzzed past them on their way to claim the duddies from the gardens and lawns. "My wounds are bad, but they're not lethal," Yuri said. "If we're going to attract an ambo drone, one of us must die." Flames now licked through the ruptured skylights. The sound of crashing columns echoed from below, and the dome listed farther. Yuri was right. There was no way around it. So Anastasia pulled out a blade and aimed the tip towards her own chest, ready to render herself duddies so an ambo drone would come. But no, what was she thinking? How unbelievably stupid. It wasn't like hurling herself off Xenocrates' roof when she was just an apprentice. She was a scythe now. If she took her own life, it would be considered as self-cleaning. The ambo drones wouldn't come for her, and as she pondered the idiocy of what she had almost just done, Yuri gently took the blade from her. "For you, Honorable Scythe Anastasia, I would die 1,000 deaths at my own hand, but one will be sufficient." Then Yuri thrust the blade inward. A gasp, a cough, a grimace, and Yuri was dead. An ambo drone sped by, then stopped in mid-flight, doubled back, and came for Yuri. It seized the salvage captain in its pincers, and as it did, the dome began to give way. Anastasia grabbed for the ambo drone, but there was nothing to grip onto. So instead she grasped Yuri's arm with both hands as tightly as she could. Beneath her, the dome fell away, plunging into the flames, imploding into the atrium. It struck the ground, destroying what was left of the palace, and let off a powerful metallic resonance like the toll of a funeral bell, like the final, mournful note of a requiem. While up above, the ambo drone carried away the deadly sea captain and the scythe dangling from the captain's arm, delivering them to a place that promised life to everyone who crossed through its doors. "We're bitterly opposed. 8 of us firmly believe that an association of humans should be responsible for the thinning of the burgeoning population. But the 4 against it are adamant in the resistance. Confucius, Elizabeth, Sappho, and King insist that we are simply not ready for such a responsibility any more than we were ready for immortality. But the alternative they propose terrifies me, for if we implement their plan, it will be a genie out of the bottle. Out of our control forever, I therefore stand with Prometheus and the others. We must establish an honorable worldwide society of deathmongers. We shall call ourselves Scythes and will create a global Scythedom. The sentient cloud, which will have nothing to do with issues of life or death, supports it. And people will come to see the wisdom of it in time. As for the 4 dissenters among us, they will have to accept the voice of the majority, so that we present a unified front to the world. Still, I wonder which is worse, to mimic nature in its cruel brutality, or to take it upon ourselves, imperfect as we are, to insert into death the kindness and compassion that nature lacks. The 4 in opposition argue for nature as a model, but I cannot advocate for it, not while I still have a conscience." From the lost pages of founding Scythe Da Vinci.